everybody, welcome back. My name is Matthew. Thank you for joining. Today we're going to look at the military expenditure theme again, but this time not as a percentage of each nation's GDP, but as a percentage of their total government budget. And that's, of course, not on the tax side, but that's on the expense side, which is typically larger than the tax side. Governments typically run deficits. And if you look at all of the spending that they do on pension funds, which we've talked about, on infrastructure, on healthcare, what percentage is the military spend as a percentage of that total budget? Again, I'm not working any more detailed with the data here than the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute publishes. They're getting the budget deficit, not the budget deficit, but the total expenditure information from the IMF, okay? And I think that there's still a few interesting, important key pieces of information here that we can learn looking at government military expenditure from this perspective. Okay, so again, we've got the 2023 spend here. Again, the US in a league of its own, China still catching up, as we've established, then the NATO countries, then Russia, all big players. Things look small here, of course, as a total dollar spend as we get, halfway down the list, but we can zoom in and still, depending on your level of interest in certain countries, depending on how much you zoom in, can still seem like a lot of money for, a small country. Even if it's billions of dollars and not hundreds of billions of dollars or $1 trillion in the case of the United States, it's a lot of money spent on the military. All right, so this is the 2023 spend. We've talked about this before. Now, let's look at the 20-year spend average as a percent of the government budget in each country. Couple surprises here. Okay, Saudi Arabia is not as much a surprise as we've talked about. They had a high spending per GDP. Okay, and if you look at the 20-year average, 17%. Okay, so that 75 billion, of course, it's smaller and smaller as you go back in the past, but still as a percentage of the budget, you just take the straight average. You don't need to weight it. 17% on average of the last 20 years they've spent on the military. Ukraine, well pulled up just from the last 2 years. We'll talk about Ukraine in a second. The average now, 8.5%, but that really is the last 2 years, pulling it up massively. Of course, a little bit from the last 10 years since they've been invaded for 10 years by Russia. South Korea, a little bit higher than we got from the GDP percentage. Interestingly, South Korea is a motor house of an economy. Absolute strong economy in Southeast Asia there. The percentage here on average is a bit higher. It sticks out a bit more at 7%. Israel, not a surprise. 10% of their budget every year goes to military, to the IDF. Here's one that sticks out a little bit more. Taiwan. Taiwan is a little bit higher in this percentage here, 6.2%. And we all know why they spend that way. Iran sticks out a little bit higher from this perspective, okay? As they're not as much of a GDP powerhouse, and the percentage of military spend as a percentage of their GDP wasn't that high, but this sticks out more, 8.8% of the budget on average over the last 20 years, okay? Look at the smaller countries. This is actually similar percentages to the GDP. A reminder, these are not the same thing, okay? GDP is totally different. That's all goods and services, new goods and services an economy produces in a year. This is how much the government spends. At all levels, by the way, in the year. This includes local governments, state governments, if you're in the US, and the federal government, the central government. Still not as high for these countries, 2-3% as a percentage of their total government budget. All right, so now let's look at how things changed in the last year. Same figure as a percent of the budget, but just the 2023 spend. Here we have Ukraine, of course. This is a wild number. 95% of their government budget was on the military in 2023. Okay, and the number, 65 billion, that does not include, it includes some of the aid that they receive financially, but their aid that they've received in the last nearly 3 years is well in excess of $100 billion US. If you look at this 2023 military budget, 60 billion here, 65 billion. The 2022 was 40 billion, so it's 100 billion. Total aid was well in excess. And again, most of the US aid to Ukraine is not monetary. It's in the form of actual equipment, actual kit, and old kit at that. So when Americans are voting on a bill to increase spending for Ukraine, it's in actual American factories to build new stuff for America. Ukraine gets the old stuff. That's how it works. Nonetheless, this is a wild figure. I mean, if you want to show one picture that shows how militarized an economy is, how much an economy is fighting for its survival, a nation, I don't think you can find a more illustrative picture than 95% of the government budget goes to the military. And that's what they've had to do in 2023. I'm sure 2024, when the numbers finally shake out, will be similar. We see that this is up really for all the countries. Okay, you see Saudi Arabia, 20-year average 17%, 30% for 2023. Not going to go through them. Let's look at Russia. Again, a large figure, 100 billion, probably even a little bit more as they hide their expenditures in other ministries, and it's a pretty corrupt country, as I've exhaustively continued to say about them. 8%, 20-year average, 2023, 22%. Okay, so 1/5 of the Russian budget is going in to their conquest to try to annihilate Ukraine, a sovereign state, a country that has never been at war for the last 30 plus years, and generally always is very different, peaceful than the Muscovites. So we can see as we get to the larger nations with larger dollar values, the last year is more. Okay, you see NATO Western Europe, double the 20-year average. China, 6.6% versus 4.2%, so like a third more than the 20-year average. Same with the US, nearly double the 20-year average as a percentage of what the government typically spends on the military. Hope you're finding these videos creative and to the point when it comes to navigating the rough waters of the financial system. And I'm happy to share with you a platform that can do the same when it comes to getting a loan secured by your Bitcoin, and that is Debify. Debify is a non-custodial, Bitcoin-backed lending platform designed for people who want to borrow against their Bitcoin while maintaining full control. Debify offers institutional-grade liquidity through independent lenders, allowing for high-volume loans of up to 5 years. All transactions are secured by a unique multi-sig escrow system, ensuring that Bitcoin collateral remains safe and transparent. This setup guarantees that your Bitcoin is not rehypothecated, and you keep full visibility and control throughout the loan process. It's perfect for those who value security and transparency while exploring global stablecoin and fiat lending backed by Bitcoin. So head on over to debify.com today to get started. Nonetheless, these percentages are a bit smaller than even Russia. A fifth of its economy is very large. It's a large economy, large dollar amounts you're putting into trying to take over Ukraine. But Ukraine is just fighting unbelievably, and we're going to see how things shake out in 2025 and looking at the numbers from 2024, but of course just in general for the heroic Ukrainians as they continue to defend their country. We see, of course, if we look down to Eastern Europe, the trend as well. If you look at the, again, I'll take off the black bar just so you know exactly what I'm talking about here. 2023 spend as a percentage of the government deficit, massively bigger, multiples bigger than the 20-year average, 2 or 3 times bigger. If you look at the Baltics, even close to 4 times almost. In the case of Lithuania, one that's always been quite small, interestingly, Luxembourg, very small country, very close relations with Belgium and Holland, but Luxembourg just way different. A small country in Western Europe that has, of course, its nation's Jews suffered just like any other nation's Jews during the Holocaust. But, a small country that's in proper Western Europe where the rule of law has been upheld even during World War II. Small country feels that they don't need to spend. These Eastern European countries that are on the front, that see the threat that continues to come from Russia as it tries to take over Ukraine, very different story. Very different story. Small as these spends may be, these black bars may be for all of them, including Luxembourg, look at how much bigger these percentages are than, say, a Central Western European country that has been outside of the Iron Curtain, has had the Allies protect its borders versus those that have not. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for watching.